Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this year's rendering competition. I'm Xian Yao. I will be the host for the event today on behalf of the core staff. At the moment, I'm excited and exhilarated for three reasons. First, so many of you have made it to this stage through the assignments, through the project, and it is a great achievement already. And second, there are quite a few people who chose to join us on the morning before the holiday break. And finally, this is the first time that we actually have a live stream. So I hope if anyone is actually watching that the stream can be enjoyable. I hope it's not flipped. All right. So about a few words about the rendering competition, maybe for those who aren't familiar with it. It's another name for the course project at the computer graphics course at ETH. Throughout the course, our students hopefully learned about topics in computer graphics with a focus on physically based rendering. They needed to complete programming assignments, 4 of them, before working on the project. The assignments covered sample warping, direct illumination, and went as sophisticated as global illumination with path tracing with multiple important sampling. In the project, they built upon the assignments and implemented advanced features or techniques of their choice. And the resulting software is used to render a scene that fits a given theme. This year, the theme is out of place, so anything that looks where it doesn't normally appear fits, be it fish in the clouds, castle in the sky, or boat in a meadow. For the past few years, the computer graphics course has grown significantly. The number of registered students grew from around 100 to almost 250, and the number of students who completed the project has almost tripled from 54 to 150. The number of applications to this competition has grown by 3.5 times. From these applications, we had to, for the first time ever, leave some entries out of today's presentations. Today, we will have in total 24 presentations. These entries will be assessed by a jury of 6 judges. So before going into further details about the rules, let me introduce the judges first. We have, as I said, 6 judges. 3 of them are from Disney and 3 not. 4 of them are from Disney. I'm very sorry. So we first have Marios Papas. You might have heard of him. Marios is a principal research scientist at Disney Research Studios. Always hit something. Leading the rendering group. He is the main lecturer for the computer graphics course, so it is expected that you know him, or at least the students. He's an expert in appearance modeling and notably measured the optical properties of snow, which are then used in the movie Frozen. Currently, his group, or my group, focuses on using neural networks to accelerate rendering and to improve interactivity of artistic tools. And second, we have Rajesh. Rajesh is a veteran in production rendering, now a PhD student after 23 years at the Walt Disney Animation Studios, and he was involved in various management and individual contributor roles, including incubating and managing the Hyperion rendering team, and driving development of a variety of tools. I believe that his advice at the beginning of the project was one of the reasons why we have so many high-quality entries this year. Thirdly, we have Doriano van Essen. Doriano is a digital artist at Disney Research Studios, contributing to multiple projects in the lab. In particular, he created quite a few scenes for the rendering group, greatly adding to our Cornell box scenes. He will be looking at your images from an artistic perspective. Okay, then we have the honor to invite 3 guests from outside of Disney Research to join us as judges today. First, we have Alan Hostetler. Alan is an R&D software engineer at Industrial Light and Magic, working on rendering. He's an ETH graduate and the winner of the 2019 rendering competition. He won a trip to EGSR 2020, which was supposed to be in London. So as you can imagine, the trip didn't happen. But he is, in any way, based in London now, so I guess that worked out. but I mean, disclaimer, we did replace the award with something concrete. Yeah. Okay, and then we have Simon Calwhite. Simon is a software engineer at NVIDIA with interest in light transport algorithms, real-time graphics, and digital signal processing. In order to show that he actually was interested in graphics, he participated in 2 rendering competitions at ETH, winning 2nd and 1st places respectively. Both Simon and Alan did their master thesis at the rendering group of Disney Research, so we hope there might be more from you that go the same path. And finally, we have Sebastian Herholz. Sebastian is a graphics software engineer at Intel Corporation. He's also a light transport researcher, an expert, if not the expert, in path guiding algorithms. And he is leading the development of the Open Path Guiding Library, or OpenPGL, at Intel, which has been included in the latest Blender release. Feel free to try it out. So let's give a round of applause to welcome our judges today. Okay. An important aspect of a competition is rules. The interest of, as I said, the interest in competition will be judged by the judges, and they will assess it based on 4 aspects. The first is the theme fitness, that is how well the image fits the out of place theme. The second is inspiration image similarity, that is to what degree the final image achieves the desired effects in the inspirational image that you picked at the start of your project. And the third criterion, the most important one, is artistic and visual quality. But I don't think we need to explain that. Final thing, technical quality, which means the technical complexity and correctness of the features used in the final image. For the technical quality, the judges might opt to look at your report and implementation. As said before, we have 24 presentations in total. Among them, 12 are from individuals and 12 are from 2-person teams. Each single presenter will have 3 minutes for his or her presentation, and each group of 2 will have at most 5 minutes for their presentation, and both group members have to present. After the presentation, we will have 1 to 2 minutes for questions from the audience and from the jury. When time expires, when there is only 1 minute left, we will note the presenters. There is a timer in front of the speakers. So when time expires, we will terminate the presentation and proceed to Q&A, to your final image, to Q&A directly. So please control your time. After all the presentations, which hopefully is something around 12:30, we will have a lunch break. During the lunch break, the judges will eat lunch, deliberate, and select the winners. I hope you will eat lunch too. Then we are back at the lecture hall at 2:15 p.m. That's important, 14:15 or 2:15 p.m. when the winners prizes presented and apéro started. So we have 3 awards: first, second, third awards. So the first award will be EGSR trip next year, and the second award, I think, it's this. It's the headphones, right? And the third award is a mouse. And we will have a couple of honorable mentions, and we will have some nice gifts for them from Disney Research. Another new thing this year, apart from the live streaming and the pre-selection, is that we will have a Student's Choice Award, which will be a vote on Moodle, so keep an eye on that. Each student that are registered can vote for 3 entries, so perhaps keep some notes for yourself. Is there any questions about the rules? I'm happy. So let's get started.
All right, let's start this thing off. Pleasure to be here. Let's say we start with our motivational image, Jennifer Schürch and me, Dan Rost. We took a bit more of a dark take on the theme, which is like a child in wartime, which we considered very much out of place. And we wanted to render this scene, which is rather dramatic, but still, what we exactly implemented to render the scene was was subsurface scattering. We ended up using subsurface scattering as part of the murky water. Then the heterogeneous media for the smoke in the background, an environment map emitter, because it looks a lot better when you have actually realistic lighting. Then the Disney BSDF, just for pretty much every object that we have a texture on or that should look good somehow. And then some more 5-point features. All right, I would say we dive right into one of the features that we implemented, which is subsurface scattering. So here you can see the skull of a bat-eared fox without subsurface scattering. And if we enable subsurface scattering, you can see that the mesh changes quite a bit, and it does look a lot more like the light can pass through the object a lot more. You can see at the thin parts of the object that light penetrates and comes out again, which gives this nice look and feel. What did we do exactly? So we implemented photon beam diffusion, an approach I think also developed at Disney Research and Pixar. It's used in Pixar's RenderMan and PBRT version 3. And it's not actually calculating bounces inside the object, but it's more an approximation of subsurface scattering. Here you can see roughly how it works. Like we sample a point and we have like a positional component and a directional component, and we can actually, like they have multiplicative effect that we take both into account. What is very cool about the approach, we can parameterize it in means of mean-free path and the scattering colors. So here you see a version with longer mean-free path and different colors. And it's very fast because we can actually pre-compute the profile upfront and then reuse this. And we can combine it with pretty much any BRDF that is transmissive.
For the heterogeneous participating media, we implemented the homogeneous media, the exponential density with the fall-off in the up direction, and heterogeneous media. Here, the implementation mostly consists of the volumetric path tracer and the medium. The path tracer is basically an extension of the path miss implementation, and the biggest change here is the additional check for medium interaction. For that, we sample a direction using the phase function and then sample a free path using the medium. Here I used the delta tracking algorithm where we take random steps, and for each step we check whether we stop or not. And we have a medium interaction if the path is unobstructed and ends in a medium. And if we don't have one, we just continue with the surface interaction like we did in the path miss version. The medium also calculates the transmittance. That's the make it a certain point. And this is done with a ratio tracking algorithm, which is pretty similar to delta tracking. Yeah, and with that, we could achieve some nice results. Here, I would like to remind you again of our vision. And this is the actual render we managed to do. This took about 6 hours to render. We have 2,000 samples per pixel. We didn't need much more because of the multiple importance sampling. We have not a lot of noise in our final render. Here you can see the heterogeneous participating media in the background, the subsurface scattering in the pool, where you can see that the light shines through differently depending on the objects in the water. We also have depth of field shown to you by the objects close to the camera and far away. And the entire scene is lit with the emitting. Yeah. Here are some of the credits of the object we did not model ourselves. Thank you very much for your attention.
So now it's time for questions.
I would be interested, so you have volume rendering and subsurface scattering implemented separately. So was it just because you wanted to have a faster subsurface scattering approximation, or why did you not just do brute force subsurface scattering via volume rendering?
So it was once like, I mean, we had to select features, and the 2 features interested us a lot. So yeah, it's more like a organizational reason actually. And then also like I think when you would just brute force the volume, the subsurface scattering, it probably blows up your render times like crazy. And back then we didn't know exactly what we want to render, so it made sense to have like a fast version of it, just in case we do a lot of subsurface stuff.
Okay, thanks.
I wanted to ask for your textures, what type of interpolation method did you use for texture mapping?
Well, we didn't use any interpolation. We just linearly mapped from the UV space to the texture space. And yeah, the textures we used in the background from the buildings are a little bit pixelated because the quality was not too high, but we didn't have time to fix that. But overall, it looked good enough, so we didn't invest more time.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Yep. Very nice submission. Thank you.
So let's welcome our second group of speakers.
Easier to not this mic.
Please stand here.
Although this is a little bit weird, it's like not a standard mic. All right, can you hear me? Okay, great.
Oh, you can start.
Okay, so we're really proud to present you our entry for the rendering competition.
And so this is our inspiration image, so please keep that in mind. Especially the different scales of the image really inspired us.
Right, so before we unveil our rendering, let's dive into the features as a teaser. So the most important features we implemented are a spectral renderer. So our renderer is like both spectral and RGB, so it can support both. We have subsurface scattering with photon-beam diffusion, an advanced camera model supporting tilt shift, homogeneous participating media, an environment emitter, and wavelength-dependent effects, as well as a couple of utility features which we won't mention. Let's focus on the fundamental feature of our renderer, which is spectral rendering. So when you have a scene, well, color is essential. Well, you know that, right? And when you want to go from RGB rendering to spectral rendering, it's a little bit challenging because now you need to shoot rays that have a wavelength attached. And if you do that naively, then you end up with a lot of color noise, which is this very flashy noise. And an efficient way of doing and dealing with this is to say, oh, I'm going to shoot a ray, a single ray with a 0 wavelength attached to it, and then attach several wavelengths so that you can combine them afterwards. And this helps improve minor overhead and CMD instructions. You can go and have better results like this.
And the spectral renderer is pretty powerful, right? So you just take your good old dielectric material, you plug in some wavelength dependence index of reflection, and you end up with this beautiful iridescence here, you can see on the prism, that can really add more details to a scene. You can do the same for homogeneous participating media, just have a wavelength dependent scattering coefficient, and you end up with a yellow sun and a red sky in the evening.
Now, let's focus a little bit on subsurface scattering. So we use the same method as you, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. We just want to emphasize the fact that it was really hard to get it to work. This was like yesterday, or well, I mean, one day before the deadline. And then we made it work, so we had got this very yummy bunny in the kernel box in the end, which is way better than this yucky one before.
Okay, so back to the inspiration. We really wanted to have... Okay, so this is a painting by Magritte, and this is surrealism art. And the thing particular with this art is that it combines like a human part of the body and a fantastic world that you can imagine behind the eye. And we wanted to have this in our scene. Let's take the color palette too. It's essential in a scene to have vibrant color palettes. And we went for Monty Python because of the vibrancy of the colors and the unique style.
Yeah, we wanted the color palette to feel out of place as well, right? Mm. So as you can see, we had a lot of expectations, and it turned out that it was really hard to come up with a scene that looks nice. So this is like the first prototype we come up with, and this is in the render actually. It's really ugly looking, okay, right? So let's keep a little bit. And we iterated, and we couldn't get rid of this very spooky, creepy, dark vibe. But we still managed to make it, because here is our submission in the end. So we now have the colors, we have the composition, we have all the elements that we described before. And let's just go through a breakdown to explain how we came to this point.
Okay, so first, just take a basic hand with textures and normal maps. It looks terrible, right? We had some subsurface scattering, and now it's much better. Add some terrain to have the boundaries of our scene. We can add some water as well to add more life.
Can we make the water spectral? Yes, we can.
And also more trees to add more colors. It's really important to have colors in our scene. And finally, the last central element, the door open with the cloud behind. It really triggers your imagination.
Yes, and as we mentioned, Rayleigh scattering, we put this Rayleigh scattering because we had the spectral render, and we improved the color palette because now we have these gradients throughout the cloud, which is really cool. And the cherry on the cake, the tilt shift effect, as we wanted proportions to be kind of a little bit tilted, and so we have a plane of focus that is tilted and can be selected with these spheres that you can see here. So this sphere defines a plane of focus that is a little bit off, and this is the final rendering that we got out of it. Right, I want you to appreciate it for a few seconds before I say that here is what we would have got with the simple RGB render without any effect, and here is what we got with the final render, which is, I would say, a little bit better, if not way better. Well, thank you very much, and see you in heaven, right?
Yeah, now question. So before doing that, I have one request for the speakers. Please try to stand together here for your presentation. Thank you, just for the camera to work better. Thank you very much. But this was well presented.
Sorry.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you. That was very nice evaluation, especially for the spectral rendering effects. The Rayleigh scattering seems quite convincing. Could you tell us a little bit more about, what are the parameters you use? How did you come up with the right values there?
Right. So it's not it's a physically inspired Rayleigh scattering, I would say, because we wanted it to be visible on short distances. So it's following, because the scattering coefficient for Rayleigh scattering is 1 over lambda to the power 4. So we basically generated a discretized spectral profile for this, and we made it a little bit very steep so that we could see the effect. So that's why it works really well in the corner box, because in principle it's on the whole atmosphere, so you would need long distances, but still we have the same low. And the idea was to tune it to work. So I generated several spectrum and tried them out in the scene until it worked and until we had this nice vibe. So very painful process, I would say.
Thank you. One more question?
One question, did you also model the scene yourself, or was it?
Most of the models were taken on Quixel. The hand was not on Quixel, it was on other websites, and the state textures as well. We just took everything on the internet.
Everything was composed. Everything we did was composed in Blender, so it was an iterative process about going in Blender, changing everything, and re-importing, exporting. So the models are not our models, but everything that is in, the whole composition, the water, the terrain, everything was done, the cloud itself, and so on.
Got it. Thanks. Perfect.
I think that's all we have time for. Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you. So let's welcome our third group.
Hello everyone, we present you the toys invention. let's talk about the motivational images. So we first came across the beautiful image on the left, which there is the cloud floating above a bathtub. So we decided on having a similar idea, having a cloud in the room. And for the other two images, we created them with AI models, and we use them as our visual library, which is a common technique in art design. And this bathtub also reminds us of the beautiful bathtub toys, which we also want to include. So the idea of the bathroom, the cloud, and the toys just evolved to our final results. And before I can explain to you how this happens, I will introduce you the features of our renderer. So we have images as textures, which allows the cute appearances of these dogs. And we also use the image texture as a textured aerial emitter, which is used as the main light source of the scene. And we can see on the back of the flamingo the pattern of the emitter. We also have procedurally generated textures. In particular, we have the marble texture, which is used as the floor tile material. We use normal maps to set up the mesh shading frames and help add more details to the model. And here we use it to generate the shape of the tile. And a big part of our renderer is this volumetric path tracer with multiple impulse sampling technique. We have both homogeneous and heterogeneous volume. And to create the cloud, we actually need to generate the density field, which is also procedurally generated with the volume noise. And put everything together, the heterogeneous volume, the anisotropic phase function, and the procedurally generated density, we have the cloud in the room. And David will continue from here.
Thank you. So now to model the material in our scene, we use the Disney BSDF, and we focus on 5 different parameters: roughness, specular tint, metallic, and anisotropic. And the effects of these materials are as here in this image. Then we wanted to add some depth to our image and then some more interesting light. So we use an environment map, and it can be seen outside of the window in our scene. And it is a scene of Shanghai. And then we wanted the focus on our scene to be on the flamingo at the center of our image. So we use the depth of field by implementing a thin lens camera. So this way, only the objects that are near the flamingo are in focus. And also we wanted to enforce the joyful atmosphere of our scene. And we use in this case, a very small chromatic aberration. And in this case, we implemented longitudinal aberration, which means that, which translates into an aura around the objects. And basically, the different colors have different focal distances. They are focused at different distances. And finally, our image looked a bit noisy after the rendering. So we used denoising using NL means and bilateral filters. And the results were very good. And now, regarding the evolution of our image, we started with to understand what was the best location of our object and what kind of scene we wanted to model. We wanted some dynamism, like if the toys are coming, we concentrated on this idea, and we modeled the scene in Blender. But we positioned the toy to understand what was the perfect positioning, and finally, we rendered our image. And here, you can see the full image. Regarding the modeling, the DAX model and also the CL model and the bucket model are made by us. The bucket model is a modification of another model that we found. And in general, we basically modified every mesh inside the scene. And yeah, I think this is it. We don't have any more slides. Thank you.
Oh, please show your final image just for the questions.
For your cloud, you're using procedural Warlow noise. Did you evaluate that at runtime or pre-bake that? And did you test whether one is faster than the other?
Yeah, because for our final C, we still want to tune the parameters for this procedurally generated volume. So we generate at runtime, but we can certainly pre-compute and store it somewhere in the load when we are rendering, which is theoretically faster.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask if you can quickly show us again the noisy denoised image with null means.
Okay, sure. The denoising, right? This one?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
I
I
think
think
you.
he just wants to see it.
Yeah, it was quite fast. It was quite fast. Yeah.
Ah, okay, okay, sure. And we haven't included, but we rendered the whole image for about 30 minutes, and I think the resolution was here.
This is denoised, right? Also, your final image.
What?
Your final image is also denoised.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
final
yeah.
image is denoised, of course. We denoise the whole image.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's welcome our first single-person team today. Take your time.
Hi guys, my name is Yifan, and my image is titled "A Kerbal Not Out of His Place," which you may be completely clueless about. I'll explain. So my inspiration comes from this video game I like very much, Kerbal Space Program. It's a very physics-based space flight simulator, and this is actually a picture from the game's loading screen. And this is an in-game screenshot where I show you what the players always do is like the Kerbonaut or Kerbal astronaut to do some dangerous stuff like staying out of a launching spacecraft and do some experiments to get science and fundings in the game. So my idea was to put this out of place Kerbonaut, which is clearly where he should not be, onto this cool spacecraft. First image as textures. I support both bilinear interpolation and also nearest lookup if you're curious. And normal map, spotlight, environment map, and heterogeneous, of course, homogeneous participating media using volumetric path tracing. For the environment map, I'm using this hierarchical warp sampling. I reference from this. I'm not sure if you can see this blog from Matt, the author of PBRT. It's also going to be the next version of PBRT. And I also modified a Blender Nori export add-on I found on GitHub to support volumetric data. And I finally implemented a small subset of Disney BSDF, mainly metallic, specular, and roughness. So from this image, I managed to create this one. The rendering images has a lot of this fireflies because of the path tracing. So I did a little post-processing to remove them because I researched online and I found that I can actually get rid of this by clamping the radians of indirect bounces passes, but I did not have time to try this. So here it is. For this post-processing, I also blurred a little bit about the engine smoke because the resolution of the simulation was not very high, and also tuned a little bit about exposure and the contrast. So here I show the features I use for different parts. For the heterogeneous media, I support multiple heterogeneous media in the scene. So here's the smoke and the cloud. And the normal map, you can see it on the cockpit. They holes which are rendered using the more normal map. And the scene is lighted by environment map. You can see the spacecraft is flying towards the sun, and environment texture is basically used on every part. Yeah, that's all. Sure.
The water looks quite convincing. What did you use to generate the surface?
Which one? The water?
The water.
It's used by Blender to generate the ocean, and the material is used by Disney BSDF. I tuned the specular to pretty high and metallic to 0, and there it goes.
Is there also a medium inside?
No, it's
to
just
absorb-
just a
the blue
surface
color?
mesh. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I forgot to mention is the engine fire. It's not exactly fire because I didn't have time to implement the emissive media. So this is actually an emitter, as area light behind the
Inside.
rockets. Yeah.
Cool trick. Yeah. Works well.
Yeah, we don't need to have 2 questions if there are not. So thank you very much for your
Thank you,
presentation.
guys.
Yeah. Next presenter is also single person. Welcome. Take your time.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bolly, and today I'm going to talk about my final project. So this is the final image I created, which is of a Christmas theme, and I will talk about some implementation details. So first of all, let's talk about my motivation for this image. On the I first saw this image on the left, which is a snowflake on a grass. This kind of macro photography is somehow unrealistic. So it is as if the snowflake itself is out of space because the snowflake is magnified. And I think this is a very good idea. So I also saw this image on the right, which I think could be a very good background where I can put some snowflakes. And to achieve this goal, I implemented several features. First of all, I want to mention that Disney BRDF is a very good choice to represent a variety of materials. Like you can see, if we change the metallic parameter to 1, we can get some very metal-like looking. And if we change the roughness to 0, we can get some very smooth surface. And a very important element in this image is the depth of field. I improved the camera system in the original Nori implementation. I used the focal length and the f-stop to indicate the angle of view and the aperture size, so that because these parameters are very popular with photographers, so using these parameters make us makes it easier to adjust these parameters. As you can see, if we change the aperture size to f1.2, we can have some very nice looking bokeh of the highlight in the environment emitter. And we can achieve more than that. The aperture itself does not necessarily to be a circle. We can supply a mask texture to create some non-spherical aperture. It is nothing more than a black-white image texture. We can do some important sampling on it, just like for the environment emitter. So with this non-spherical aperture, we can create this star-shaped bokeh. And this image shows the features used in the final scene. First of all, for these very high detail tree branches, I use image texture and normal mapping to enhance its details. And for the Christmas ball and bell, I used to create a metallic or a glossy plastic material. And yeah, it is. But we cannot only rely on the environment map to illuminate the scene. So I also added several simple emitters like point light or spotlight to further illuminate the scene. And finally, the DUF and non-circular bokeh is a very important element as well. So finally, I could, sorry, one half minute. So finally, I want to mention that I did not process except and tone mapping in Blender. So we can use the filmic tone mapper, which preserves a high dynamic range of the image better. And yeah, this is the final image, and I hope you are Merry Christmas.
Okay, let's keep the questions short. or non-existent.
Maybe a quick
have-
one for your simulation of the optics. You still use the thin lens model, or did you do anything fancier, like simulating the entire lens with all its elements?
These CG resources are downloaded from the website. I just play them in Blender and export them to Nori. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, I reinstate, please be aware of time. Yeah, on that note, let's welcome our next presenter.
Hello. Welcome to my presentation of my final scene, Shipping Clouds. Well, let's start with the inspiring image. What I wanted to do in my project was to basically render a ship that is, instead of swimming in the water, out of space, so that it is swimming inside the clouds. So what we need to render something like this is basically, we need to have a ship with complex textures. We need to have the background, some environment light, and we need to have volumetric clouds at the bottom. So the features needed to implement something like this are heterogeneous volumetric participating media. Then to give the cloud a little bit more custom scattering behavior, I also implement the Greenstein anisotropic phase function. Then for the background, the environment map emitter, then depth of field, and images as textures for the ship. So let me talk about some more challenges and details of the whole thing. Like the most challenging was for sure the heterogeneous medium. Like here you see a rendering of the Stanford Bunny, and also of two custom-made clouds, one with a lot of forward scattering and the second with a lot of backward scattering. And here the biggest challenge was to get the integrator right, which is a path tracer with multi-importance sampling. Then the second feature was the environment map emitter, which had to importance sample the environment map. And the result of this you see here on the bottom, where on the left side is basically then the environment map without importance sample, in the middle with importance sample, and on the right side you see how the samples are distributed over the environment map. So yes, if we take all those features together and combine them in one final image, this is what we get. It's basically on the bottom here you can see volumetric clouds that were also procedurally generated in Blender and then in Houdini. In the background there is an environment map that gives this nicely lighted sky. The ship is also a model which whose textures were also mapped on it. There are additionally some point lights distributed all over the place to give a little bit more custom lighting. So yes, that's basically it from my presentation. Thank you very much.
Questions? Oh, thank you for the presentation. Questions?
How long took it to render?
2 hours.
Oh, please.
2 hours, 20 minutes with 2048 samples per pixel.
So what are the parameters like for the clouds? Did you really use a high albedo or?
Yeah.
Like the scattering coefficient was around 0.5 and like absorption was around 0.5 and scattering a bit higher, 0.8 or something. So yes, quite such that it gives here in the background a little bit higher absorption, but it then should fade in a certain kind of a gradient towards the light. This was the idea.
Looks really convincing. Yeah. In terms of the surface properties or surface materials you use for the ship, what did you end up using in terms of your material there, especially for the I'm sorry, I'm blanking out now in English. The sail, yeah, exactly. Thank you.
The sail, it's everything are just diffuse materials, but I adopted BSDF a bit because those textures contain They're two-sided textures, like the sail has on both sides the same textures, basically.
Got it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to figure out whether it's out of battery. No, it's not.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, if you can, please probably move a bit to the front if you're next. Thank you. Thank you. But take it away.
All right, then let's just get started. So we'll start with our inspirational images. Just ignore the portals for now. On the left side, we have like this abandoned industrial hall, which we figured would be cool to have this abandoned hall, which is like devoid of life and there's not really anything going on. And like, let's just put something in there which does not suit the scene at all. And then on the right side, portals, this is for later on. That's like a feature that we or Jasper implemented. Yeah, just so you know, when we're talking about portals, what we know. This is from the game Portal, maybe you know it. So the features that we implemented are basically all these here. Some features, for example, the images as textures, I think probably everyone implemented this because it's a really useful feature. We also have, for example, the Intel Open Image Denoise, which was really cool to see how well this works to actually denoise this image. I was kind of surprised that I spent so much time in the CMake files and not actually writing C++ code. Those of you that also implemented it probably know the pain. And then one thing I quickly want to talk about, which I implemented, is the Disney BRDF, which I thought was a really cool feature because you can model a lot of various surfaces. It also was quite tricky, and I found some bugs one day before we had to submit it, so it was quite tricky to get it right. But we used it in the final scene to model some surfaces, and I think you can make really cool looking textures and models using the Disney BRDF. Now let's just give the microphone to Jasper and he can talk about the portals that he implemented.
Yeah, so my goal was to implement some kind of portals where you can actually look through, where you can see a portal within a portal endlessly. I also wanted to show some screens that show the view from a camera where you can also repeatedly see the screen. And I didn't want to fake it with just rendering the screen and putting it in an image texture. So what I ended up doing is implementing a portal and modifying the raycast coroutine that actually, if it hits a portal, modifies the ray and shoots it again until we hit some non-portal. First, I thought for the screens we could also use simple portal techniques. In the end, I ended up using a render texture instead, because otherwise photons could have went through the screen or the camera and out the other side, which wouldn't have been great. Let's look at our final image. Here you see the portals. Where's the laser point? You see the portals here, of course. You see the endless loop. There is actually a portal around here behind the camera. There is also render textures. As you can see here, this screen shows exactly the same image as we are looking at right now. Whereas this screen shows the image as seen from this camera. And here in small, you can see the other side of the portal. Yeah. As for the Disney BSDFs, we use it on the camera, on the cups, on the knobs of the TVs. Yeah, you want to say something? Okay. Yeah. We did actually implement that everything is rendered with the photon mapping. Unfortunately, we didn't add a spotlight to the portal, so you can't really see how the light is going through. But you can see it a bit on the shadow underneath the table. Like the lamps on the other side of the portals, they actually illuminate the spot underneath the table. So yeah, photons also work with portals. In fact, I think photon mapping is the only way where portals really work, because they modify space itself. So you cannot just do a raycast to the nearest light source, because there may be a wall in the way, but another path may be available through a portal. And yeah, the photon mapping is the only path tracer that actually fully worked with portals in my experience. Yeah.
I guess just a question from my end about this portal. So how does it work? So when a ray hits a position in one of it will teleport to a corresponding one, the same position, and then continue from there? Is that how it works when?
Yeah, so what I'm using is linear transformation. Basically, when a ray hits a portal, I look at the coordinates in local position of the portal, move it to the local position, or take it as local position from the other portal, and calculate the world position from it and continue the ray hit.
Got it. Yeah.
The camera in the shot, was it meant to be there? Was it a choice?
I wanted to show the camera because then you can see where the other screen is looking from.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, thank you very much for the presentation and for the questions. So, yeah. Okay. This group chose to not join us today, so I'll just show their image. Yeah, this is their image. It's a cool image, but I'm not responsible for presenting it, so I just run over the slides in like 10 seconds. Okay, so thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura, and I will present to you my final rendering, which is called A Bar Underwater. It was inspired by this image. So this was the inspiration of it. It's completely out of place. I'm pretty sure you won't find a bar underwater, but it still kind of looks like it could exist. So if you go deep enough, maybe you'll find it. And that's something I really like about this scene. And also I like this mood that you get when you're underwater and you have this bluish light. So I wanted to achieve this. But I decided to go a little bit darker. This is my concept drawing I did. What I wanted to have is a bar which looks like it's a place where illegal deals are happening, and there's a diver having a drink with kind of like a mafia boss octopus. And yeah, so keep this drawing in mind. So just for comparison for later with the 3D rendering. For the features, the most important part for me was the quality of the material. My scene has a lot of different objects, and also a lot of different objects that use very different materials, and I needed my renderer to handle those. So I decided to implement Disney's BRDF just because it can handle a huge variety of materials. And I also included image textures and normal mapping just to add even a little bit more details and just that it doesn't look too flat. Now that we have the texture, it still doesn't really look underwater, right? So what is missing here is the particles in the water. Because when you're underwater, you almost never see water that's really clear, especially not in a cave like this. I decided to implement a participating medium here, a homogeneous and a heterogeneous using delta tracking. Not just for scattering the light, but also because when you're underwater, red light is often filtered out. So the red, you never see red colors. So the particles also help with removing the red light in the that are far away, more far away. So here you can see my final rendering. Yeah, you see the scattering of the light, which makes it a little bit foggy, and also gives this dark feeling. Yes. Are there any questions?
I want to ask about your BSDF. When you choose the index of refraction, now that you're underwater, do you have to change the ratio there so that water is now outside compared to the metal? Did you experiment with that? Did you do any changes that were visible, or?
No, not really.
Okay.
The air bubbles, like of course with the dielectric, but not with the
metal or the.
No.
Okay.
Their state with the implementation.
And my other question would be for the meshes. Did you model some part of this scene yourself, or?
Yes, I modeled actually the octopus myself. So that was a sculpting I did in Blender. And also the building itself and the glass.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next presenter. Yeah, thank you for coming up so soon.
So first of all, thank you for the invitation to the competition. I'm Joel, and after seeing this photograph, I really thought that the building looked cool, that the perspective chosen was very interesting, and the fog in the sky, or the sky outcut by the buildings, really reminded me of a spider web. And this is what brought me to the idea of not only introducing controversy in the out of place, but also in out of size, by placing a huge oversized animal, such as a spider, which is in reality quite small, on top of these buildings. My render includes additional features such as depth of field, images as textures, and stratified sampling. And additionally, also includes a set of different emitter sources, such as the spotlights, textured area emitters for glowing objects, and the environment map for a cool background. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to implement participating media due to the time constraints and other project deadlines. This directly brings me to the challenges I faced during this project. One huge challenge was the time management, as we had to acquire a lot of new skills, such as using Blender for the first time in the given time. Now, in the remaining minutes, I want to go deeper into what points you need to consider when implementing a new feature, such as the textured area emitter, and also what I did to construct my final scene. After having acquired the knowledge or the required instructions to implement a new feature, such as the textured area emitter, you need to first handle the input image data. I did this by using an external library and then converting the given UV values from the object mesh directly from Blender into the correct color values on the surface. Next, you need to consider sampling, which should be important sampling towards the brighter regions of the glowing surface. And additionally, you need to also choose a suitable integrator and find a good reference renderer, such as Mitsuba 3 in my case, to evaluate and compare your images to. Finally, we come to the construction of my scene. I really liked the perspective from the inspirational image, which I wanted to keep here by having multiple lines given by the buildings in the scene to point all towards the middle. I did this by using 3D models from the internet and placing them around my camera. Next, I also wanted to put more focus towards the main protagonist of the scene, the spider in the middle, and introduce some additional geometric shapes, which I did using the spider webs, and then finally added the main model, which is the spider on top of these buildings and some smaller details, and additionally also placing different light, warm and cold light sources around in my scene. And this brings me to proudly presenting you my submission for this competition, Silk City.
I would be interested in how did you implement the importance sampling of the textured lights?
I tried to follow the approach of the PBR book, which we used for the other features in class. And I'm also actually not 100% sure if I did it correctly, but it looks fine. And also in comparison to the reference renderer, it looked correct.
Okay, and what's the technique it's doing?
Sorry?
So how does it work?
The importance sampling. Yeah, you need to have a mapping between the values or the brightness of the input image textures to sample them correctly during the rendering evaluation.
Yeah, I guess we can look at your code if we want. Yeah. So thank you very much. And, you are sitting very tight.
Okay, hello everyone. I am Xiao and this is Boxiang, and we're here to introduce our product to the northernmost. Okay, so our picture is motivated by a Chinese anime film called 大鱼海棠. The plot of the film includes a mysterious place where huge whales fly through the clouds. And our two motivation pictures here are from the scenes depicting that place. Okay, this is our final picture. We also created our own story, actually. Once upon a time, people believed that at the northern edge of the world, there existed a place where people would obtain perpetual happiness. A group of the bravest adventurers sailed through the clouds. However, when they finally became the first human to reach that dreamland, nothing could be found there. So this is a really sad story where people devoted everything in pursuit of nothing but just false hope.
So let's get to some technical aspects. All the features listed here is what we use in rendering this scene, and we will talk about our modeling. We downloaded the orange models from the website, and unfortunately, we use the same boat as the Team 5 because the free source is very limited. And we just put them in the position that we want and modified the gesture of the whales according to our preference. And we modeled all the rest clouds by ourselves. Start from a single cube, and we drag the faces and sides to the appropriate position and use subdivision to make it smoother. And then we have the models, how we put color on the models. So we mainly use this Disney BSDF and texture mapping. And there's nothing new, just following traditional implementation. We find the UV coordinates on the model and search for the color on the image texture map image. And so one thing worth mentioning is also the sail on the boat is actually a plane. So the normal vector on both sides is heading for the same direction. So we have to add this two-sided BSDF to make to attach color on both sides.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce about how we made the clouds. So first, our clouds are made completely through Nori implementation, so we didn't download any VDB files from the internet. So the meshes themselves, no matter if we use diffuse surface or any sort of participating media, it just doesn't have this hazy effect that could be obtained from Blender. So what we did is we used procedural volume inside heterogeneous media with the density generated by Perling noise. This creates this smoke-like effect. But it's still not really optimal because the media still has a really clear boundary, which doesn't really look like clouds. And so what we did is we did a two-layer approach. So the base would be a homogeneous media, and around its surface, we added a second layer of heterogeneous volume using Perlin noise. The Perlin noise in this case needs a little bit of fine-tuning to have this effect. So what we implemented is a way to make the outputs actually look like clouds. So what we did is we combined the Perlin noises generated with coordinates of different scales. So using only one scale, using coordinates from only one scale would result in the picture you can see on the right with a depth of 1. But if you combine Perlin noises from both large-scale coordinates and low-scale coordinates, we would get the effects on the left side, which looks much similar to clouds.
So let's, in this last section, we'll talk about some scene settings. So the main color in our scene, in our image is purple and yellow, which cause a contrastive effect to make it more attractive. And we use 4 light sources, 2 directional light, 1 in the front to provide a warm yellow light, and 1 in the back to provide the purple light to compensate for the shadows, and the environment to simulate the galaxy. And also we produce some visual flow effect to concentrate the viewpoint to the destination of the boat to make a feeling of the adventurous journey. So that's all. Thank you a lot. Any questions?
Just curious, how long did it take to render? How many samples did you use here?
So for this image, we only are able to use 32 samples per pixel. And to render this 32 samples, we take roughly 4 to 5 hours. Yeah.
It is 4 to 5 hours, not 45 hours.
4 to 5, yes. Approximately, because I can't remember the exact time.
Right. And for the moon, did you basically, was it a diffuse texture applied on a sphere, or is this an emitter?
It is an area light.
It's an area light, so
Yeah,
it's a textured emitter that
emitter.
illuminates.
Yes.
Got it.
So there are no further questions. Thank you again for your nice image.
Thank you.
Yeah, we really hope that you can render it for a bit longer, but yeah, that's what we have. It's already nice. Okay, for the next presenter, she is not, she's not possible to join us today because of an injury, but she recorded a video which I'm going to play. So yeah, there will be no Q&A, it's just the video. Is there any sound? No sound. What? That's not good. Sound, just give me a moment. Yeah, it is already there. So, I actually see it, so I need. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'll just maybe play it here. Not ideal.
Hello, my name is Andrina Arnold, and I will present you my image, Out of Place. I could not find an inspiring photograph of the red telephone box in the Arctic, so I've collected 2 motivational images, one of the Arctic and one of the red telephone box. I placed the red telephone box into the Arctic, which are represented as iceberg, and the reference to the team out of only the red telephone box in reality cannot be found in the Arctic, but also that the communication is impossible as nobody can reach the red telephone box floating on an ice floe. Furthermore, nowadays, with other means of communication, the red telephone box is out of place. The phenomenon is not only the structure of the ice floes and the iceberg, but also the reflection in the sea. Here you can see a brief overview of the features of my renderer. The features marked in red I've used for my image. Let's have a look at my technical details and challenges. For the environment map emit the paper Monte Carlo rendering with natural illumination from the computer science department of the University of Virginia guided me a lot. The main problem I faced during implementation was that I had a pixel. Then I implemented bilinear manipulation of the colors of the texture, which then solved the problem. For the chromatic aberration, I at first did not realize that I had to sample a ray for each color channel. Therefore, I had to modify the sample ray function in several files. Now I would like to present you my image, out of place, the red telephone box in the Arctic. To make the red telephone box to appear in focus in contrast to the far away located ice floes and icebergs, I used the depth of field. In addition to this, a spotlight inside the red telephone box is deployed. These special effects are used to catch the viewer's attention on the red telephone box. Moreover, I utilize the images as texture to map the texture of the snow onto the ice to make it appear more realistic. The effect of all my features used are marked with arrows.
Yeah, so that's her presentation. I think it's a nice image. So, so now I would like to say we take a 2-minute break and resume at 11:45. Yeah, so I will be here talking, whether you're back or not. It's up to you. Of the rendering competition of the computer graphics course. Let's welcome our next presenter.
Hello. Oh, it's working. So let's get started. Hello, I'm Haitao from Computational Science and Engineering. This is my final presentation for the rendering competition. These are my inspirations. Basically, these two surreal images perfectly match our theme out of place. Basically, there are some natural things come out of nowhere and they replace a human's head. These are my features for my renderer. I don't have much time for implementing very fancy features. So what I'm trying to do is just render a good-looking image from these very fundamental features. About my scene construction, I take a low polygonal city as my background, and there's a mysterious sci-fi tree at the front that interrupted the city, came out of nowhere, and there are some giant abstract elements surrounded the tree, and the whole thing is emerged with a homogeneous media that makes the scene looks more dim and foggy. And another setting about my scene is that there are some person nearby there are some people nearby the tree, and they are somehow got affected by some kind of magic power of the tree, and their heads started transforming into some flowers. And this is my final scene. It took me about 4 hours on Nori, and hope you guys like it. Sorry. Sorry. There are still some technical details about my scene, and first is the reasonable arrangement of the emitters to make the illuminance of the whole scene looks better. And also, I played around with the geometry nodes and some fancy things in Blender to make the sci-fi tree looks more mysterious and good looking. And also, some small details are implemented with image architecture and combined with normal mapping to make it look very detailed and authentic. And that's all. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you can relax. You did great.
Does it work now? Okay. Are the particles sampled, like the emissive particles?
You mean these particles as emitters?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're part of the emissions, and actually there are not thousands of emitters. They're joined together, so it's a complete mesh.
Oh, it's one mesh.
Yeah, it's one mesh.
Okay.
I created this in Blender with the particle system, and then I need to convert it to mesh and join them together. So it's considered as one mesh.
Thanks.
Just a quick question from my end. Which ones of the models did you model yourself, and which ones did you?
First, the tree is downloaded from the website, and also these flowers are downloaded from the website. And other these simple abstract meshes are created by myself, like the door frames and the tours on the above, and these crosses around this tree. And also there is a icosphere wireframe here. It's hard to see, but it exists as these black lines. It's also created by myself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Come up. Thanks. So we have one moon in the sky, but imagine you had your moon of your own. Like this. And then you have some people who come and want to take your moon. Well, more like this. So as you can see, there is an android holding a moon, and you have hands emerging from the ground, which want to get hold of the moon. So we will go through a speedrun of the features that I implemented for this image. And I will show you an incremental version of the image with each feature. So first, the model I modeled myself in Blender, first in T-pose, then I rigged, skinned, and, well, inverse kinematics, and then I just set it in some pose. The details were added later on so that when I put it back in T-pose, it was a bit weird, but I mean, for the final render, it looks fine. The ground is just like basically a cube with a self-fracture modifier applied to it. Then we add texture on top of that. I use textures for the moon, the rocky ground, the android, but also for the environment map, obviously. For the moon in particular, I also combine that with the texture, with the area emitters to get textured area emitters, which look pretty fine, I think. After that, we still have the heterogeneous media for the hands. Now, I implemented the basic heterogeneous media with volumes and so on, but what I really wanted to have is really hand-looking volume. So for that, I had to decide when is a point inside the hand or not. To do that, I pre-compute for each point on the grid, whether it's inside or outside. It's pretty easy. For each point on the z equals 0 plane, I shoot a ray upwards. I compute the intersection with the triangles. And then instead of doing it for each point in the cell, for each z after that, I can just infer if it's inside or outside, depending on the z value, and comparing with the t value intersection points. This is, as you can see, we can have the hand. We can also put it in a homogeneous medium. So with homogeneous media, but you cannot see the whole hands. Environment mapping, light, as you can see here in green, is the important sampling that I add to do that. And finally, we have, well, some glowing hands. And finally, we still have to add some dynamism to the scene. I add motion blur. Yes. And this is my final result. Thank you for listening.
Questions?
Great image.
Thanks.
The motion blur, is it only on the camera, or did you implement anything else other than?
It was an additional feature, like not part of my feature, so it was really just on the camera, and I basically have two poses for the camera, one closer to the other. And just, yeah, other questions?
Yeah, we have time for one more.
I'm wondering if the moon is just an emissive.
It's basically an emissive, yes, it's considered as a light, but with texture applied to it. Basically, I multiply by the texture coordinate value. And yeah, texture have like bilinear filtering and so on.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
your names. Take it away.
Yeah, so hello everyone. We are Dario and Sergio, and we are going to present our project, our image. So we wanted to render a tornado because we think that it was an interesting thing. And we thought that maybe to fit in the theme of autoplays, we could put it inside a glass box in a room and play a bit with the reflections and refractions on the glass. So, well, there aren't many images of tornadoes inside glass boxes, so we decided to use Midjourney AI to generate the image. And so some of the features that we have implemented are in relation to light, the environment light to play with the reflections on the glass, and the spotlights to be able to focus the light on the table. To get more realistic materials, we have implemented Disney BRDF and normal mapping, so we could achieve better results. And one of the main features for our image is the participating media. We have implemented homogeneous and heterogeneous volumes using different techniques like delta tracking or ray marching that we will explain how to use them to adapt to our needs. And then also we have implemented a realistic camera model simulating a whole lens system formed by different lens interfaces to get nice effects like depth of field, lens distortion, and vignetting. To do the tornado, we have used different VDB files, and we have combined them in Houdini, adjusting the different densities.
Yeah, we also wanted to fill the glass with some terrain to give the idea of having like a real environment inside the glass, not just the tornado standing there. And to do this, we used a Blender plugin who allowed us to download real cartographic data and generate with satellite images texture and with real height data, the model of a mountain. So we used this to generate this patch of terrain. And we also worked on the borders of this terrain using a texture to create a stratified look. And we use this by scaling the UVs vertically such that we had like a more, starting from a normal rock, we could like create this stratified effect. And so putting all these things together, this is the final image that we created. And we have a lot of elements. And the scene is mostly lit by an environment map, which reflects and refracts on the glass, and by two spotlights, one from the right of the image and one from the left, that's act one as a key light and one as a fill light for the dark parts of the image. And after this, we also worked a bit on the post-processing, and we tried to highlight the features that were interesting to us of the image. Especially, we saw that there wasn't, like due to limited lighting condition, we hadn't a lot of contrast in the image. So we tried to adjust this in post-process. And we also try to apply a film simulation last to try to get more, like to highlight more of the colors. We also used open image denoise for the denoising of the image. It was very useful, like as probably everyone that used it knows, it's really, really effective. And we also try to store, like, we can use feature buffers to improve the denoising and like to reduce blurring effects. And we try to work with the volume. We also store transmittance inside the video buffer, and this really helped preserving some details on the tornado. And so this is our final image with grading, and with post-process. We wanted to highlight some interesting features. For example, the fact that one of the issues that we found early on was that when you have a lot of, like the main part of your scene is inside a glass box, and you are only lighting with, most of the light comes from delta lights, like spotlights, you don't really get any next event estimation light contribution to that. And you can, like you can't even hit the light because it's just a single point, right? So to do this, we implemented an approximation. We just, since the glass is very thin, we just ignore the glass during next event estimation. And this allows us to get interesting lighting on that. And we also modeled some water with homogeneous media. And I think we used delta tracking for the tornado in the front and remarching for the tornado in the back. That's because this helped with render time. Yeah, sorry.
No worries, you're perfectly on time. So thank you very much. This is pretty cool, pretty cool. Question?
Yeah, maybe one from my end. I was not able to completely follow how you were able to texture. So from what I understand, it's not a 2D texture applied on the top and then stretched. You must have had some sort of 3D volumetric texture on your rocks. Can you explain a little bit more how you did it, or did you just texture it from the sides?
The texture on the side? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So we had this patch of terrain, which is a square, right? And we just extruded sides of the face, and then we unwrapped this mesh and we applied the texture to it. So it's just textured mesh.
So it's a 2D texture projected from the side.
Yeah, exactly.
And from the top. Got it. Yeah.
What do you mean by post-processing?
Yeah. So this exposure adjustments, we adjusted individually the tones of the shadows, midtones, and highlights, and we also applied arch for a more cinematic look. Yeah.
And you don't have a roughness map on the glass, I guess.
No, the glass is perfectly dielectric. No roughness. Yeah.
It was a choice.
Yeah. We really wanted to have like a see-through, and we really didn't want to ruin the reflections that were happening there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me see.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, one more.
Just a quick one. The room in the back, is that the env map, or is that also modeled?
The room in the back. The room is just a window and a wall, and it's modeled. It's a model that we didn't do. It's just a model we downloaded. Yeah.
Okay. And so the windows are again like this pass-through thin glass.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that everything is modeled. It's not like an environment on the background.
Awesome.
Yeah, so very nice. Thank you. Okay. Next.
So hello everyone. First, I'll show you our inspiring photograph. So this is a snow globe that was designed by a company to protest coal-fired power plants in the UK. And instead of having the typical Christmas idyllic snow globe, instead we have black smoke and we have protruding chimneys and just contrast with the typical impression of what a Christmas snow globe is like. And what we hope to achieve is a similar effect with a similar setup, but we want to portray the out-of-placeness in war and emphasize peace given the current world situations.
So regarding the functionality of our renderer, we support participating media, both homogeneous and heterogeneous ones, and we can also render emissive volumes such as fire and explosion. So we also implement advanced versions of photon mapping such as final gathering, caustic maps, and progressive photon mapping. So our renderer also allows spectral rendering and thus dispersion. And we can also have environment map used as infinite light source. And also we do importance sampling on brightness. And other small features includes image as texture, depth of field, and light types of spotlight and directional light. So we're going to talk about participating media and spectral rendering because these are the parts we spend longer time. So for homogeneous medium, we allow arbitrary mesh shape. And for this purpose, we build one separate BVA tree for volume meshes. And heterogeneous volumes are imported from OpenVDB, and we support various transmittance estimation methods. So of course, we do multiple importance sampling between light sampling and both BSDF and phase function sampling. And for emission, we implemented two methods. The first one is a naive one, which we simply sample emission at medium scattering event as a contribution to the previous path vertex. But a better one would be to importance sample the temperature grid, which is a 3D discrete distribution. And we would compute black body emission according to temperature and wavelengths. So black body emission is a wavelength dependent quantity, and it is built upon spectral rendering. So spectral rendering, if we simply replace the 3-channel RGB into the dense spectrum representation, it would be very costly for both memory and computation. So we refer the method used in PBRT v4, which we store only object quantities as dense spectrum, and each ray would carry around a sparse spectrum with wavelengths that are importance sampled. When a ray hits an object, it would sample the corresponding dense spectrum property with the sampled wavelengths, and this achieves efficient computation. So based on spectral rendering, we are able to build dispersion on perfect dielectric material. It would only deploys one wavelength and removes the other, and this inevitably leads to color noise, but still we can use many samples to remedy this issue.
So now I will show you guys our final image. So this is what we created, but afterwards we tuned it a bit, post-processed it using Lightroom to emphasize the color contrast and to make the explosions pop. So the final scene is inside the snow globe. We have an apartment building that just got bombed by a missile, and at the bottom you have buses and just people living their everyday lives. And on the outside, what we wanted to have is to portray a cozy Christmas atmosphere, and this was done by using a environment map at the back, and we have plants on the sides just to portray the everyday nature of this. And we also have a quote by George Orwell on the bottom. Now, some of the features used in our final rendering image. For the things outside the window, we have an environment to blur the background, to give more focus on the snow globe. And inside, the explosion was created using heterogeneous and emissive participating media. And to create better shadows, we used a spotlight, and the meshes were also modeled using Blender. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice image. You mentioned that you tried a bunch of methods for rendering the heterogeneous media.
Yes.
Which one did you end up using in your final image?
You mean heterogeneous medium? You mean the transmittance method or the emission one?
The transmittance.
Transmittance, like the 3 methods, the delta tracking, ratio tracking, and ray marching, they have like similar effects and similar efficiency. So I just choose ray marching with 50 samples per ray.
And then for emission, did you end up using your importance sampling technique based on temperature? Yeah. Maybe one more question from my end. So you mentioned all the meshes you modeled in Blender. Is there anything you...
Not really. So here the arrow points like here, the snow globe, and the code is made by ourselves, but the meshes inside are kind of assembled with online resources. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. is our next speaker here.
Hello, everyone. Great that I have the chance to share my final project with you. So the inspiration came from my own sketch. So you see a giant bear with a hole in his chest sitting on a box filled with hearts. And the box has a locked door and the road is leading us to it. In the sky, you see a balloon with a key hanging from it. And the final image looks like this. So I implemented the following features. Yeah, I will introduce the most important ones one by one. So the first one is environment map emitter. So after implementing it, I have the kind of the background of my scene. And I also model some simple meshes. Together with the more dedicated meshes from more experienced artists online, I created the following scene in Blender. And after importing those meshes into Nori, I have the following image. And then I also implemented texture mapping, and I used textures for the snowfield, the rock, the road, and the bear. And then I also implemented measured BSDF with important sampling. I used the MERL database. So for the evaluation method of the BSDF, I just read the database. And for the sampling part, I used the Cook Torrance model with Beckman distribution. And I sampled kind of data for each material and then fitted those parameters. Yes. Using the least squares curve fit of MATLAB. And after applying those materials, the scene now looks like this. And more detailed for the box part, so I used 5 materials for this part. And I also used materials for the balloon, the key, and the street light. In the end, I implemented a spotlight to light up the front of the scene. So there is still some problem with the scenes. I don't know. Yeah, you can see some noise, maybe some spotlights somewhere. But very luckily that I have this snow scene, and you can interpret it somehow as reflections of snow. So it's actually a very unexpected gift. So yeah, that's all. Thanks a lot.
Really nice work. I would be interested, why did you decide to use the MERL BLDF and the measured data?
It's quite random. So I need to implement some BSDF, and since everyone else implement Disney, and I think that it might be interesting to also investigate it a bit.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, there are not other questions. Then thank you again for your presentation.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yeah, this is my motivational image. You see an image of an object you know. It's an area emitter, a textured area emitter, also known as a MacBook. So let's go to my features. So I implemented the normal map you see on the ground. Then texture map also. In the background, you see a textured area light. I downloaded the map from the NASA web page. So these are actual stars. Then depth of field, that's not applied here, but then also Disney BRDF. This is my final image. You see there is the moon, that's a textured area emitter. And the ground is modeled in Blender with the sculpting tool. I just like pulled out and pushed in. And yeah, so the sphere is just for having some color. It could be interpreted as a building or maybe a planet, but yeah.
Did you paint the building yourself?
That's just the texture.
Okay.
Like I had to like modify the sphere so that I was able to rotate the texture. But yeah, this is just a background image wallpaper. Yeah.
And for the material on the ground, what did you use for the water surface?
So actually, this is just normal mapping plus texture, and then just diffuse. Like it's in, but like it's everything to zero. Like maybe something's wrong, but yeah.
Are you important emitter textures or?
I'm only important sampling the environment map, but not the textured area light.
Okay, there are no further questions. Thank you again for introducing textured area emitter as MacBook. So.
Hello, everyone. Our project is Matryoshka Wine City, and it is inspired by the movie Inception. Like graphics people are trying to render a metaverse, a simulated world, but have we think of the possibility of us being inside another simulation of some higher order civilization? So we modeled a city in a wine glass as the world we are currently living, and we try to combine it with Matryoshka, the nesting dolls. And here,
this one is actually generated by Talent, not by our.
Yeah, it's our motivation image. And this is our final image. You see a larger wine glass like holding a cyberpunk city, and there's another wine glass in the middle holding a modern city. So it's nested out of place. And empowered by a few key features. The first one is many light sampling. It builds a BVH light tree. Like the ray-intercept BVH tree considers the surface area of a bounding box alone, but the light BVH also considers the directions of the light, which is encoded by the bounding box, a bounding cone, and it also considers the power. And it defines a set of new arithmetics for the bounding cone, like the identity, how you merge the two bounding cones, how it calculates the importance functions, and all omega, which is equivalent to the surface area of a bounding box.
Okay, thanks, Jahun. Now I'll talk a bit about my interesting features. It's actually not too much. I just implemented, for example, the most challenging one being the homogeneous partition medium instead of the heterogeneous one, which probably some of you have already implemented. But here's a few notes that I would like to share. For example, MIS really matters when you implement volumetric renderer. As you can see with our MIS, you get a very drastic improvement from the right to the left. But actually, this MIS is a bit tricky to implement because you need to change the ray intersection framework a bit. That is to say, every time when you try to shade a point, like the point from the floor, you connect the point with the emitter, where the original framework will reject this sample because of shadow ray. So you have to change the framework a bit so that the shadow ray now returns a transmittance of all the volumetric effect that happened through it. And also we need a careful handling of the EM sample in PDF so that the MIS array can be computed correctly. Okay, another thing is we further improved our framework of volume renderer such that it supports spectrally varying coefficients. For example, when the RGB channels of the sigma S, so currently it's just a scalar, we can also make it an RGB color so that different colors of light can scatter differently in the media. This is also important in our scene because we have a wine in a glass, which only allows red light to transmit through. Another thing is the Disney BSDF that I implemented, which probably makes some of you suffer from. That's a bit of math going on here. But unfortunately, we only need to sample 2 lobes, which needs a bit of heuristics because you don't want to just sample naively a cosine hemisphere. You want to some probability being given to both the diffuse and the specular lobe, which makes kind of sense because the metallic and specular parameters changes. As you can see from the naive, to our heuristics, you get drastic improvement with equal sample amount. Due to the time, I will skip the stratified sampling. Okay, so now let's talk about. So my part is basically a procedurally generated city, which is actually nothing new because you can find tons of resources and open source codes on ShaderToy. And also the homogeneous scattering media in the wine part, where I use the measurement data from this paper for the wine material. And also the many light sampling empowered by my teammate. And Disney Principal DSDF, depth of field camera, just to improve the background, because it's aliased a bit.
And second, like the glass has some physically simulated liquid by the particle method, and the city has like over 9 million triangles and about 5 million vertices. And this is the final image before denoising, and this is one like after denoising with the Intel Open Denoise. Yeah, we also implemented the other denoising techniques, but like the bilateral and something, but we find the Intel works the best.
So that concludes our presentation. Thanks.
My first question would be, for the many light sampling, is that a technique you followed from a paper or something you developed yourself?
It's from the paper, like it's called using the SAOH, like the cost function for building the tree. I also experimented with SAH cost, which does not have the bounding cone. But the thing I'm different from the paper is that in the normal paper, like the bounding cone, they do not consider the beam width for the spotlight, because the spotlight you have a beam width and also a cutoff angle, right? But they use just the 0 for the theta O here, which means like they do not consider the beam width. And I add this functionality to it.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
I have got two questions. One is with the Disney DSDF importance sampling. You mentioned you use some sort of heuristic. What is your heuristic?
So basically, we need to pick probability of sampling which lobes, the diffuse or the specular. Given that this model is parameterized by specular and metallic parameters, right? So our program needs to decide how much probability given to each lobe based on these two parameters. And we have we proposed two options to this, which both works very nice. One of them is using the maximum of specular and metallic as probability P. And the other one is to use a linear combination of the two, which could also be parameterized by some other user-defined parameters, such as the diffuse sample rate, whatever, proposed by Mitsuba, for example. Yeah.
Okay. Second question. Yeah. A lot of glass, a lot of small light sources. What are you doing that you're not getting a firefly disaster?
Fireflies. Okay. Great question.
I would have assumed with all the potential caustics which are generated, there would be firefly disaster. Are you clamping anything or?
No, we didn't clamp anything. Actually, this image is just rendered by 33 samples, 255 test samples. It's not too many. And so you are doubting that there should be fireflies everywhere, right? Or
are the light sources maybe not bright enough?
Yes, you can see here, like in this part and this part, some light maybe are sampled from an SDS path, like a specular, diffuse specular, something like that. But fortunately, this is not in most cases, because in our case, the light sources are inside the dielectric surface, which only gives us DSE, like D is the diffuse, S is the specular, and then just the I. We don't have SDS paths in general. Yeah, so which makes our task just surprisingly easier. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Today we will be presenting our submission to the rendering competition. First of all, the main features we used to make our image was the environment map. We took this star map from NASA and it is sampled using environment sampling, importance sampling. Also, we used a textured emitter, namely a moon. We also used the texture from NASA, so yeah, the original moon. We also implemented an advanced camera model that includes the two main features, the depth of field and the distortion. We also had non-spherical aperture, but we didn't use that in the end. One of the biggest features we implemented was CUDA GPU path tracing. So the whole renderer was rewritten from scratch, and everything runs on the GPU. So starting from bounding volume construction to calculating all the cumulative distribution functions for the textures, for the meshes. If you maybe looked into the Nori sources, if you like sample an emitter or a surface that also uses these distribution functions. In the end, the render took around 3.5 hours using 8,000 samples per pixels at the resolution of 4K, which is around 5 million samples per second. We tested this, and compared to Nori, it is an increase, but there is still a lot of GPU optimizations to be done. So like, for example, the VVH construction uses spatial partitioning using Morton codes, and that is already good, but there are, of course, lots of improvements we can add on that, like surface area heuristic optimizations, like it is done in Nori, but we didn't manage to do that in time.
So another attractive feature of our custom renderer was the similarity of the syntax to Nori. So the goal was that, so he was focused on the GPU side, and I implemented some of the advanced features for Nori, like heterogeneous volumes. The goal was to just be able to copy paste that code into the GPU renderer, and then it should work. Unfortunately, it did not make it into the final image. But still, it's surprisingly ergonomic to program the GPU with this framework, like in comparison to some other GPU work that I've done. So it's very nice in that sense. So the only surviving feature from my side was the modeling of the meshes. Yeah, and well, this is also basically our motivational image, as the motivational image we submitted in our initial report was very hand wavy and drawn with MS Paint. Yeah, was not really worth showing here. But so how is our theme out of place? Well, we placed a pool in space, which normally isn't there, right? And also water shouldn't exist like that in space, but it looks nice with the reflections. And then we added the mirrored astronaut, because texturing astronauts is pretty important, pretty difficult. So we just made a mirror, and now it looks cool. All right. So yeah, this is our final picture. And yeah, the moon might look familiar, as it's, well, it's our moon, right? So it should look familiar. But it's also the same texture as the submission before is used. Yeah. And so we kind of made it look like it has some volume in it, but that is mostly due to sampling artifacts. Still, I mean, if we go for visual, it looks kind of nice. Yeah. And then we can see the advanced camera model, right? The pool is distorted towards us. It's not just a straight line. And the depth of field didn't really have too much of an application for this scene in the end. So it's very subtle to non-existent, but it's in the model. All right. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Question about the CUDA implementation. Did you, was it just a mega kernel path trace, or did you investigate like wavefront path tracing?
Yeah, we investigate, we use smaller kernels, so it's split up. We also use adaptive sample and denoising, which make use of these smaller kernels. Yeah, the denoising and didn't make it in the final image, but yeah, it is used using smaller kernels, so 4x4 pixels usually. we investigated with different sizes, and that worked best in combination with our adaptive sampling implementation and generally the speed in CUDA.
Okay, but the main loop of the path tracer is just one kernel running. So you didn't do like one bouncer flight and then the next in a separate dispatch, so you can.
No, it's one dispatch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. We have 4 to go, so let's try to wrap it up in 20 minutes.
Okay, so let's start with the 2 motivational images. The first one is a screenshot from a 2D animation, actually. And here the out-of-play thing is that the water is replacing the paper of the fan and also the fish kind of flying in the air. And then we try to combine that with the second image, where we have a rabbit on moon, which obviously doesn't belong there. So the features I implemented were image-based textures, bump mapping, environment maps, homogeneous and heterogeneous media, 3 different phase functions. And for the volumetric path tracing part, I also implemented multiple importance sampling. I will focus on the heterogeneous media part since that is the most important for the final image. Sorry for the integral here, but I thought it was important to include. So the atmospheric medium has an exponentially decaying density. And unfortunately, this integral here doesn't have a closed form solution. So I ended up using ray marching for evaluation. One other problem is that the scattering coefficient of the atmosphere is very highly spectrally varying. So it scatters blue light much more than it does other light colors. So what I ended up doing was sampling 1 color per medium interaction and then reweighting the whole sample using multiple importance sampling. The atmosphere also uses the Rayleigh phase function, which can fortunately be analytically importance sampled. So I also did that. And this results in Earth looking like this, with a nice looking atmosphere. But for a final look, this is still missing some details because there are no clouds. So the other part I implemented was clouds, which are just modeled as homogeneous media that are constrained by 2 concentric sphere shells. And they are modeled via height maps. So I have a grayscale texture that gives the height of the clouds compared to the surface for each point on the surface. And again, this needs ray marching for evaluation because it can't be done analytically. So this is then what the clouds look like. And we can also combine the 2 to get an Earth that looks like this.
So here is a list of the features that I implemented for this project. And now I will quickly go through 3 of them that are interesting and are actually used in our final rendering. The first one is modeling meshes. Because our inspirational animation was from 2D, so it's quite challenging to turn it into a 3D mesh. And I used the sculpting feature in Blender to model the fluid surface, and also used some physics-based simulation techniques to model the water splash. And also I used the Bezier curves to outline the boundaries of the fluid. And also I painted the textures by myself. And as you can see, this is the resulting rendering of the foreground of our image using Nori. And secondly, I implemented this Disney BSDF. And here you can see a gathering of the Cornell boxes of different materials of different parameters. And in our rendering, we used for the coefficients and also the water fan, we both use this Disney BSDF and also each paired them with a texture map and a bump map to model the unsmooth surfaces. And I also had some fun implementing an advanced denoising method based on the paper robust denoising using feature and color information. And so basically we extract the depth, albedo, and normal information and together with their variance information and feed them into the denoiser. And as you can see on the left app corner, that the denoised image looks pretty good. And so here is our final rendering. So this actually contains 3 layers of out-of-place settings. The first layer is that the fan should be made of plastic or paper, but now it is a water fan. And the second layer is that the fishes are usually live in the river or the sea, but now it appears in the water fan. Last but not the least, the water fan together with the fishes is full of earth elements, but now it appeared outside of the earth. So it feels like a recursion. So I will conclude our presentation with a poem from Whitman to the things or people that are feeling out of place. That you are here, that life exists in identity, that the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. And this is the verse that I want, this image is the verse that we want to contribute to this course, and we hope you like it. And thank you for listening.
One question to the cloud. Is there a reason that you also made them so spiky in this final image?
I think kind of. So what I ended up doing was when reading the texture maps for the height map, I adjusted the gamma to kind of get the right gradient of the cloud thickness. But this has this kind of spiky artifact in some places, so it's not really intended, mostly an artifact of the representation.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
really cool results. From Brian, I wanted to ask, it seems that the fish have kind of like a hand-drawn effect on them. Did you use a normal BSDF for there, or did you eliminate them?
But illuminated with a point line, so that's
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
The name? No, I mean, oh, yeah. Take your time. Sure. Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to my presentation. So I'll start off with my motivational image. It's an image that I found online, and I think it fits quite well to the scene. I also like the colors, and I think it looks quite cool. So first I needed to get some assets. I got them from Blender Kit. I needed the phone and the banana for sure. Also, I wanted to add some more elements to the scene, so I used an apple and also a glass of water. Next, this phone object that came in one single object, so I had to take it apart to the individual components. So I implemented a Disney BSDF class to parameterize the different surfaces differently. So I used the Roth metallic for the metal elements of the phone, and I used the clear code parameter strongly to generate this kind of plastic look on the phone. Also to give the wire and the base such a some kind of rubber feeling, I used the Disney BSDF roughness parameter a lot. Then to put the numbers on the dial and also on the plate in front of the phone, I used the images as textures and a dielectric material on the rotary dial of the phone. Next, for the fruits, I used some images as well for the body of the apple and for the body of the banana. For the small thing on top of the apple, I'm not sure what it's called in English, but I used a diffuse BSDF there, a brown one, and also a dielectric material for different components of the glass with varying refraction parameters depending on if the component interacts with the air or with the glass or with the water. Then for the lighting, I use an environment map emitter, for which I used an image of a Soviet museum, and just because I like the lighting of it and the red, I think the red accent, they go well with the yellow phone and the banana. And I also use two area lights which are stacked on top of each other, a larger yellow one and a smaller white one to give a more warm light that shines directly onto the central elements of the scene. To really emphasize this central element, which was the phone and the banana that is out of place, I used a thin lens camera to put the focus of the image and there. Now to my final image, it took around 8 hours in rendering time and consists of about 8 million pixels, and I took 5,000 samples per pixel. And this is what I ended up with. And not everything did go as planned. For example, you can see that the phone that I initially, the phone number that I initially planned to put on the plate in front, somehow after I took the plate apart, the UV coordinates were messed up and somehow it didn't work, and it was already 4 a.m., so I left it as is. And also after I rendered it, it's nice, but how would you dial the number 8? And then I thought, oh shit, she's right. It's so the clip is on the wrong side of the phone, and I guess I'm it's out of place. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
I guess, yeah, I can ask one from my end. For the banana, the texture, did you take it from a photo, or you found it online, or?
So the texture for the banana, that came with the asset that I downloaded. But unfortunately, I had to re-stretch the banana to make it fit the wire on the end. So then the picture didn't line up perfectly. That's why you also see this small black line on the bottom of the banana. But I just tried to crop the picture to make it behind so that you won't see it. But I didn't really, there's still a little bit missing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I have 2 presentations left.
Hi. So we're here to present our submission for the rendering competition. The theme was out of place, and we decided to take this image from Studio Ghibli anime, Castle in the Sky. We wouldn't expect to see a castle in the sky in the clouds, and we thought that was a pretty good fit for the theme, and also would be a good way to test our features that we were planning to implement. Speaking of the features, these are some of the features that we worked on during the project: volumetric path tracing, homogeneous and heterogeneous participating media, Disney BSDF, image textures, environment map lighting, depth of field, chromatic aberration. We'll go over some of these and see how they kind of build up our scene. First up, I guess I'm talking about the volumetric path tracing. I implemented it with multiple importance sampling, also giving support for heterogeneous and homogeneous participating media with the isotropic and Henje-Greenstein phase function, implemented heterogeneous participating media with delta tracking, as well as procedural volumes using Berlin noise. Ultimately, I'm showing some examples of the tests that we ran. Ultimately, we kind of played around with different settings, different combinations of the different participating media and its parameters to get the final positioning of all the clouds in the scene. We also used an environment map emitter as the main lighting for the scene. It was using the Monte Carlo rendering for natural lighting paper as reference. And that was the environment map that we ended up using for our final render.
So what I implemented is Disney BRDF. So it is used for everywhere except cloud and ocean. We put an ocean at the bottom of our scene, as you will see, and for the leaves at the top of the scene, we had to support the transparency we had in our texture map. While initially it didn't have it, but yeah, to make our leaves more realistic, we had to add the transparency support. And for the textured area emitter, I just wanted to add some fancy effect on the ocean by applying the textured area emitter at the ocean floor. So, yep. And for the ocean, we could not have many primitives. I mean, triangles on the meshes, because we do not have enough time to calculate all the ray intersection for many meshes. So we applied kind of low poly, but while applying the depth of field so that we cannot see the kind of triangles that on the meshes. And we applied camera distortions so that we can stretch everything else's except the Laputa at the center to emphasize the Laputa. And it also makes the water boundary arc shape like horizon. And last feature is chromatic aberration, which makes ocean and cloud more colorful, especially for the near the boundary of the image. And applying everything, our final rendered image is like this. Yeah, we got some firefly noises, but yep. So for the leaves at the top of the image, we got some kind of transparency. Due to the transparency, we can get some kind of brighter part and darker part, and so on. And yeah, for could you?
Yep, I think that's.
Yeah.
Questions? Or too hungry?
One question maybe from my end. So you mentioned you're using Perling noise for getting the density of the clouds. Is it like homogeneous volume and then you have some threshold for the Perling noise to when you enter or not, or do you just directly sample the density from the Perling noise functions?
So for the clouds in the front, it's just homogeneous participating media. So I felt like it kind of fit what it looked like. Participating media on the back of the clouds, and it's just sampling the Perl noise with fractional Brownian motion to it as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we should just proceed maybe to the final speaker. Sorry for waiting.
No problem. Hello, everyone. My name is Quentin, and I will present you my image. And so basically, I forgot to put the image, motivational image that I drawn at first. So it was just a ballet dancer above water. And so you can see here, there is a ballet dancer above a body of water and with butterfly emitters that are flying around. And I wanted to have, once I finished the 60 points for the features, I decided for fun last weekend to implement ray traced portals, at least to some extent. And so I added, as you can see, there is two inner scenes. So one with a castle that's called the Kokura Castle in Japan, and with an environment map inside, and another scene with two whales, the mother and its baby, swimming in high seas. And so through this presentation, I will show you two aspects of my project. So first the ray traced portals, and then the composition of the scene. So for the ray traced portals, the image is noisy on purpose, but I use the mist path tracer, and in fact, there is a small limitation. So you can see on the left, there is no portal, and on the right, there is a portal, but the result on the right is noisier because, in fact, you cannot sample an emitter that is outside a portal. So because of this limitation, you can only have a matte integrator between two images, two portal. But except for that, the ray may exit and enter any portal in the scene. And so now for the scene composition, so you can see an image of Blender with my scene. And in fact, it's important to note that all the objects are in the same Blender scene, but not in the same Nori scene. There are 3 different Nori scenes and one for each scene. And I did this because it's way easier to make each scene separately. So I went with each picture and the main scene, which I'm going to show now. So that's the main scene with the ballet dancer. You don't see very well, but you see the 2 picture frames. And here, that's the first scene with the environment map and the Kokura castle. And that's the last scene with an homogeneous participating media and the 2 whales that also have a normal map and a texture map on it. And this is a result where you have the main scene and the rays that are melting the color of each picture into the main picture. And when I was trying to figure out the lighting of the scene, I was wondering if I should put an emitter in the main scene, also an environment map emitter. But then I thought that ray tracing is a bit maybe in between paint and photography, in the sense that in paint you have a huge freedom of doing, but you have a rough result because you're using a pencil. But in photography, you can capture the world in a very sharp fashion, but you are only bounded to the possible ways of the world. And so I think ray tracing is a bit in between those, in the sense that you can you get best of both worlds.
Excuse me.
Sorry. Sorry. And so this is why I try to keep the thickness with a dim lighting in the scene. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Just one question from my end about the meshes. Which ones did you model? Any of them yourself, or?
Yes. So I forgot to mention it, but the butterflies, I modeled them on Blender and used the projection of the texture to get the emitter on the mesh. And the other ones, I put the link in the report.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's conclude. Thank you very much. Right, so thank you everyone for staying with us until now, and I'll see you again at 2:15 for the awards. Very good images, and the judges had quite some difficulty deciding which one should win and in which places. So in the end, we decided on 3 honorable mentions and the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place. So I will present those awards in that order. And for each of these winners, one judge will come and comment a few words about why it is selected and present the certificate and the award, the prize to the winners. So first, let's look at honorable mentions. We have 3 of them. So the first one goes to David and ETH. You can come to the front if you're here. So if they're not here, I don't know. Are you here? Do you want to? Why? Yeah, please come here. Yes. And Rajesh will be presenting the award. A lot of certificates. Yeah. Do you want to make a few comments to the of the entry?
I can give you the award first, and
yeah, come here. Yeah.
A few. As you can see, the image is brilliant. What we all liked about this was the composition, the way you described how you had kind of a vision of having clouds above your bathtub with toys flying, and then this I think is also very cute. So I think that kind of swayed me. So great job, and then also all the technical stuff. Actually, I'm not repeating it, but I think that's a given because you guys worked really hard throughout the semester and for the final project to get this done. So again, great job and congratulations again. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you. And then our second honorable mention goes to Dano and Jennifer. Please come here. And you, Marius will present it.
Big congratulations. This was a fantastic submission. I really like the colors you chose, also the technical features and the valuation of them was really fantastic. I think this is what we would expect to see from papers. Yeah, and very convincing subsurface scattering implementation, and also the rest. I mean, the composition, the tone, everything was great. Really fantastic job, and yeah, I wish you all the best. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, again.
Thank you, Marius. And then we have a third honorable mention that goes to Marius and Clement. Please come to the front. Alan will present the award. Okay, Marius, you can act as Marius, but no. Yeah.
Congratulations to the winners. This is really a great submission, and we really like that you went to great lengths and implemented spectral rendering. And as you have shown during your presentation, it really made a difference for your submission. So congratulations.
Thank you, Alan. So let's give a round of applause for the honorable mentions. Those are great work. And but now we sort of move on to greater work. The third place goes to Lucas and will be presented by Simon.
Congratulations to the yeah, we just really liked the composition, colors, like the whole presentation of this image. It shows like technically it's probably on the simple side compared to some other works we've seen, but if you even take simple things but put them in the right place, you get really awesome results. So congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, now I have to tell a little story. For the second and the first place, we had a vote between the judges, and the vote was 3 against 3. So that's the reason we shouldn't have 6 judges. So even now, I think some are not convinced which one should be the first or the second. But here is the result as it stands. The second place goes to Joshua and Lei. Please come to the front. It will be presented by Doriano.
Yeah, so congrats. It's this one. Oh, there. Congrats to you. As mentioned, this was very close. It was very difficult to decide, but composition is great. Looks like a professional image almost. There was small imperfection probably on the clouds. Was the thing that pushed it to the second place. In general, everyone did a very good job. I'm very surprised about the results.
This one. Okay, that one works. Okay. All right. So the first place is, I'm not sure if you think the same as I do, but I agree that it should be first place. It's goes to Dario and Sergio. Please come to the front and it will be presented by Sebastian.
Who is who? So here, this is for you, and this is for you. And yeah, we were really impressed by it. It's a really nice composition. Also, the idea of putting like a tornado in it, and that you mentioned that you modeled it with Houdini and put it together. Interestingly, when I saw the image the first time, my first question would be, okay, there's glass and an environment map. How did they do it? And I wanted to raise this question, and you directly answered it. So I had to think about something else. It is a really, really nice work. The lighting is pretty good. Also that you did later some sort of, post-processing with tone mapping, and that really, really, was the small thing which pitched it then to place number one. And yeah, congratulations that you probably will be then at Delft at EGSR. It is a nice conference. We probably will see us there again, and yeah, enjoy it.
Yeah, so I would like to call for another round of applause for all the winners and for everyone's hard work. Thank you. So we have this thing. I don't know how many of you voted, but I think we have a result. So I might as well just announce it. Do we? Okay. Okay. Exciting. Okay, so the Student Choice Award also goes to Joshua and Lei. So congratulations again. And what do we have? What have we planned for it?
I guess we will give them another certificate. Right, but we can do that during the apero.
Yeah.
Do another choice. So.
Okay, so do you want to say a few words?
I would like to say
okay.
a few words. So yeah, first I want to thank all the students who have done this instrumental amount of work, especially those who have submitted to the competition. This is such a lot of work. And really thank you for putting much effort into this, and it showed. It was one of the hardest competitions to judge, and I think that's a nice problem to have. I hope this was enlightening to you, working on a project of this caliber, having such a strict deadline. this is quite informative of what's possibly to follow. Yeah, you've done a fantastic job, and thank you so much for it. I also wanted to thank the wonderful TAs we have. First, our head TA, Shanyao, who was really orchestrating everything behind the scenes and also made this competition possible. Thank you very much, Shanyao, for all your help this year. It was great to have you. Many students, and it was really nice to have such a really good team to help with it. So I would like to thank Rajesh, Leah, Lucas, Daniel. Yeah. So with that, I'll give it back to Shanyao to tell you what's next.
No, okay, it works now. Yeah, so I don't have much, so I actually wrote something also to conclude this this competition. So maybe it sounds a bit repetitive, but I still want to say it. So I would like to thank all the participants for their effort in the project and presentation, and thank the jury for the assessment of the entries from both technical and artistic aspects, and thank everyone in the audience, both present and on the stream, for joining us on the last day of the semester. Thank you very much. We have spent an entire semester talking about computer graphics, mostly physically based rendering. Along the journey, we studied strange concepts, implemented intricate algorithms, and fought formidable bugs. I hope that you all had fun and learned something in this journey. If you find rendering interesting and would like to do a project or thesis in this field, please contact us. In the end, I would like to again thank the other TAs, Leah, Carlis, Rajesh, Agong, Lucas, and Daniel, who really spent a lot of time on the course, grading assignments, fixing code base, and answering questions. To be honest, they probably spent much more time than the expected workload from the ETH. Thanks to them, I did not yet have to grade 170 to 200 assignment submissions, and without them, this competition would never have been as successful as it is now. So please join me in a round of applause for them. In the very end, I would like to just wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. So see you at the apéro and then at the exam. Goodbye.